to the breakfast show here on Faith FM. Today, if you are listening live, is Thursday, the 15th of January, 2026. I'm in the studio with my good friend, Shell, who is now sitting right opposite to me as my co-host today. So I'm very glad that you accepted to do that, Shell.
Yeah, got to be done at the moment.
That's right. And
I'm having fun. I'm nervous in this chair. I prefer the producer chair for sure, but it's fun. And yeah, great Bible study to be part of.
Oh, look, it's great to have you here.
And if you didn't get to hear that, make sure you jump on the podcast.
Look, you're being humble. You're being humble. I think you're a very talented person, and you shine both behind the computer screens, fighting the AIs and robots of the world, and here talking about the Bible.
We had some major robots today, and I feel like we had to call in reinforcements. It wasn't me fighting them.
Yes,
praise the Lord for Michael.
Michael, our boss,
our CEO.
Our CEO.
Right.
He definitely helped us very early in the morning, and of course we have producer Sandy covering for Shell today.
Yes, you do. Good morning.
Good morning to you, Sandy. Do you have another quiz question for us?
I have another quiz question. Okay. What kind of giver does God love according to 2 Corinthians 9? What kind of giver does God love according to 2 Corinthians 9? 0491064669. Well, only half of that, Skafy, but a bit of an interesting thing. I remember this as a small child as one of my memory verses.
That's right. Me too.
Yeah.
Oh, really?
Yeah. What kind of giver does God love according to 2 Corinthians 9? 0491064669. Send us your answer.
We're going to talk more about that verse when we get to the answer. But, you know, I think that this passage is more important than people can sometimes make of it.
For sure. Yeah.
And it's harder to practice than a lot of people give credit to, but it's more important than I think that a lot of people give credit to. But we're going to talk about that later, because I would like to know, how can we make our streets safer, Shell? Is that what you're going to be talking about?
It is. I'm going to talk about two things. So I'm going to talk about a sad story, but I'm also going to talk about something good as well. I'm not sure which way to start, but
start with the bad news. You know, when people come to you with a good news and a bad news, start with the bad news.
Let's start with the bad news. So recently we know that, and we've covered it a little bit here on Monday with Justin, that a woman named Renee Good was shot and killed in Minnesota. And that's close to where I'm from, so, you know, it resonates home for me. I fly through Minneapolis, which...
Oh, really?
Yeah, I always have to fly through there. That's usually where I stop, because it's much harder to get to the other airport depending on who I'm flying with. So oftentimes my sister has to drive the 4 hours to the Twin Cities, Minneapolis, St. Paul, and pick me up from the airport. Oh. So... I'm very familiar with the city in that aspect, you know, just driving through it and around it and whatnot. And I've got friends there. But they are also a very hateful state towards a police, I guess. You know, they're very anti-police state. Mm-hmm. And it has shown a lot through the violence of the state, that had the crime level that has risen as well. But this story... about Renee isn't necessarily about that. The thing that I wanted to bring up and talk about with it is that we need to be cautious, because sometimes things can just happen that are bad without anybody being at fault. And in this story, people have chosen sides. You know, the police officer murdered her, or she had it coming because she was interfering. You know, so those are the two major sides that you have that people have been choosing. And one thing that is really important to know is that you should always wait at least 72 hours before you make an opinion for anything like this, because you see footage and you immediately get an emotional pull towards a belief or how it happened from that angle, from what you just saw. But you need to take at least 72 hours, wait for all kinds of more information, more details, everything to filter through.
I think it's a good rule of thumb.
Yeah. Or else you have jumped on this elephant and the elephant is just running through the jungle and you have no control over it, because the elephant is, you know, just this mindset has taken sway, and after 72 hours, when all of the evidence is coming through, which is usually by that stage, most of it is there. But your mindset is already too advanced. You've already made up your mind because
you're kind of committed with that idea.
That's right. You've just gone through the jungle already, so you're not going to change your frame of mind. So always take at least that amount of time before you decide. But that being said, in this situation, we had, after the 72 hours, a lot more information coming through. We know that police officer 6 months before had been drugged by a car that had run him over and drug him down the road.
What?
And he had gone to hospital, had to get 30 plus stitches, and this was a scary, horrible experience.
So he was traumatized of being overrun by a car already.
Yeah. And you can say, well, that shouldn't affect him because he's a police officer. But anybody who's been bitten by a dog when they're a child knows that every time you're going to see a dog for the rest of your life, you're always going to be scared. You're always going to have that little bit of fear. So you have that as well to think about. Now, I don't believe that she was trying to run him down from all of the footage that I've seen. I know that there's some stuff that's coming out to say the contrary at the moment, but from most of the angles and from most of the videos, it appears that she saw the police officer who was trying to open her door. She decided she didn't want that to happen, so she went into reverse, realized reverse isn't going to work, and so she goes forward. And then she sees the police officer in front of her, and she grabs the wheel, and she twists it to get away from him. But by then, he had already seen those wheels coming towards him. And it takes at least half a second for the trigger to get pulled from when you've decided to pull it. By the time the trigger gets pulled, that half a second, she has turned those wheels. But it's too late for him to change his mind.
Yeah, the bullet is already out.
He's committed now. You know, it's that point, that half a second is just so crucial. You know, those wheels were coming at him, and he has the right to defend himself, you know. So it's a terrible situation.
Yeah, and I know that some people said, hey, you know, some so-called internet experts saying, hey, but then, you know, hitting a bullet into a driver wasn't going to stop the car from hitting at you. So the right and the right response to that would be
to jump out
of the way.
Has anybody been in Minnesota at this time of year?
Look, I don't know if that
Minnesota
person had been,
at this time of year is going to be icy. Trying to jump out of the way just means you're going under the vehicle. So
wow.
Yeah, there's a lot of details to think about. But yeah, jumping on a road in Minnesota right now is not smart.
It's not a clever idea.
Yeah. So there's so much to think about, but it's just, as everyone said, it's just tragic.
Yeah.
You know, I mean,
very.
I don't believe she was trying to kill anybody, but ultimately she was manipulating, you know, she was there doing her American right of protest, you know. That is what America's all about, being able to, it's like in the Constitution, to be able to argue with your government and fight against the government. You know, it's there.
It's cultural as well.
That's right, and it's a cultural thing. You know, so, but she didn't get out of the vehicle when she was told to, and that is a crime. You know, she was impeding the federal work that they were trying to do. So there's aspects of it that could have been avoided. And so now I want to jump into our good news thing. Okay, so there's this in Baltimore, Maryland. There is a initiative that started taking place in 2007, and it has been building up momentum, and it's called Safe Streets, and there's 11 sites where they're doing this now, where they have community members from the areas that they train up. And they train them up in, they're teaching them conflict resolution training, injecting strategies back into the community that can help with solving conflicts and different things, and how to mediate in different situations. This is a high gang area, lots of gangs throughout that area, and they have been building this up through time where they don't need to now call police to come in and help, because people are always afraid. Police have to be able to defend themselves if they're seeing people pulling guns and different things like that. They're going to react in a different way than what these safe street people do react. And they're trying to get in to community people who they know. They're part of this community. Any situation arises and they can jump in and try to help before it gets out of. They haven't had any situations where they've had to call the police to come in, and they've been able to resolve over 1,000 conflicts so far. And they've even had periods in these gang areas that have gone for more than a full year without a single murder, without a single death from gun violence.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So just since 2023, it has been increasing to the point where they've got now 24% less non-fatal shootings and 35% down from the year before. So it's building up. So they've also had mediations. They've done 729 mediations just in 2024. Referrals for drug help and things like that, over 1,000 of those. Work placements, they've been able to help with 1,684. Family assistance, 300. And meal assistance and housing. They've been working in all of these areas to the point where their crime level is dropped so significantly that they're counting the days between when anybody is being shot.
Wow.
It's so significant that all of these 11 sites, and it is run by, I think, less than half of them are done by the Catholic Church, and then the other half are done by a Hope Community Center that they do these trainings and they help. But now the mayor has gotten in, and he's really helped as well. And it's just made for a completely different city and area.
It's really revolutionary, and these people are doing really God's work there in these areas. It's amazing. By teaching principles of conflict resolution and communication, look, they managed to solve so many problems
without violence,
without having to resort to the police. That's a great news story.
You're listening to the Breakfast Show podcast on Faith FM. Positively different.
We have a quiz answer for you now.
The kind of giver that God loves, according to 2 Corinthians 9, is a cheerful giver.
Cheerful giver.
A cheerful
yes. Look, the thing that I wanted to say about the cheerful giving side of things, I learned a lot of things. I'll tell you exactly what it is. It means that if you are ever giving reluctantly, don't give. Dial down the amount that you're giving until you can say, you know what, I'm so glad that I can give this to God as my gratitude. So to God, in terms of giving to Him, God is rich. God is the richest person in the universe. He has everything, all the cattle, all the money. What He wants is our heart more than everything. So He wants us to give because by giving, we can show to Him how much we are grateful for Him, how much we love Him. But if that giving starts to become begrudging, God says, hey, hold your money. Like I'm not asking for you to give anything to me with a begrudging heart.
Yeah. So if it starts to get that way, but I would say that the first time, if you've never given back to the Lord, like if you've never paid a tithe, if you've never given an offering back to the Lord, do it reluctantly at least once.
No. Tithe is differently. Yeah. He's talking about offerings. Tithe, you give reluctantly or not. Tithe is different because tithe is not giving. Is returning.
Yeah, but either way, I still think if you've never given an offering back to the Lord either, do it reluctantly at least once and see what happens.
Yeah, see what happens. Yeah. But definitely say, God, can you give me the joy of giving? Because that's the thing. It's about equality. It's like when you're giving someone a present, you have to give something that like you kind of feel good about it yourself as well. Yeah. And you know that the other person's going to like. Just like the presents that we are going to give to people that were born in January and they text us with their date of birth.
Ooh.
We're not going to give anything reluctantly to you, even though our
No.
gifts are very special and expensive and beautiful and amazing. We're going to give with a cheerful heart, just like God wants us to give. How do you get these gifts? It's very, very simple. Just text us here, 0491 064 669. There's no T's and C's, no conditions. You don't have to sign up for anything. Just let us know what is your date of birth, and you are going to get
go
into
in a
the draw. Yeah.
and one person will win an amazing prize. And there's so many options that, we will be able to give to you, whether it's board game, a Bible, dinner with a host, cookbooks, merch. We have amazing books and things that people give to us all the time to promote that we have collections of as well. So we could give you some of those. And also, if you don't want any of that, you just want some money so you can spend it the way that you want to spend it, we can give you a $50 voucher as well.
That's right. And speaking of having some money to spend, President Donald Trump announced on his Truth Social on Friday that he intended to cap the amount of interest that credit card companies or banks could charge their clients.
Well, that sounds amazing to me.
It sounds amazing, except that, the real world doesn't really kind of work like that. I'll explain to you what are some of the risks. Now, I'm pretty sure that a lot of people, that would be, a lot of people will be receiving that, with very glad hearts, and some people will experience very likely significant savings in their bills. So, and that is the good part. However, that from an economic perspective, there are some risks there. There can be some unintended consequences from that. We don't know if that measure is going to get in place or not. Donald Trump actually wanted it to be fully in place
by the 20th,
by the 20th of January to celebrate his first year in his presidency.
Yep.
We don't know yet if it needs approval from Congress or not, so they're studying that in America and see how they're going to do it. However, some unintended consequences can happen. For example, have you ever played that game Whack-A-Mole?
No, but I've seen.
Have you seen Whack-A-Mole?
Yeah.
Well, Whack-A-Mole is like you have like a bit of a soft hammer thing, and then you have these little, plastic
Moles
moles
that are
popping up and down. And you have to try to hit them in the head, and they're coming up and down, up and down. This Whack-A-Mole is exactly what happens in economics when you start imposing tariffs of any
knock one
kind of.
down and
Yes.
another pops up.
That's right. So, for example, banks. How can banks make up for that? For these loss of interest that they're going to be receiving. There's a few ways. Number one, they can say, "Hey, we're not charging you interest, but it's only 10%. However, your credit card fee will be going up this year. So you were in a $0 a year fee. Now, for you to have this credit card and maintain is like $500 a year. So they can do this in this way. The other way that it can do this, it can say, yes, well, we're going to only charge you 10%. However, if after X months you don't pay the amount, well, we're going to give you a penalty of X% more, and they're making up for that. Or the points programs, mileage programs, and these kinds of things that are subsidized by the interest that the banks make, well, they're going to have to water that down. Mm-hmm. Or the worst case scenario was the bank said, hey, you know what? We cannot afford, losing money at that interest rates. Because at 20, 30% interest rates, they're making so much money that they can't afford to give more credit to people. They can't afford more people to sort of, don't pay back and so on. It's not going to break them. But if they're making less money, and for banks, they say that 10% is around about the threshold of their breaking even point for them to make money or for them to lose money, because they have expensive structures behind them, marketing and people and all these kinds of things.
Very high salaries to pay.
Yes, high salaries and all these kinds of things. What can happen is that they say, look, they're going to start becoming more criterious about who gets the credit or who gets to extend the credit. So a lot of people that currently have massive credit cards in the United States, they're different.
Galore,
it's credit cards galore. People have like 5, 6, 7, 8. I have seen once I went to New York and I was going to pay for some grocery. There's a lady in front of me, and she had like a pile
lot of them,
of 10 different credit cards. She passed the first one, no credit. Second one, no credit. Third one, no credit. I think by the 7th, she got something like to purchase like a $60 or $70 bill. So that was a while ago, but I think that story is not unique either. I think that a lot of people are really indebted. Actually, Americans have over $1.3 trillion of credit card debt alone. So it's very different from Australia. Australians are not that indebted. in on average. Far from that in general. So we don't understand so much how that. But in the United States, like people like survive based on their credit cards payments. So what could happen is that a lot of these people, the banks can come and say, hey, by the way, there's no more credit for you. And they cut their credit. And if people lose access to credit, well, they will going to consume and buy less stuff. And by them buying less stuff, which in America, I was really impressed when I went to America this other time, because in America, like, people spend money a lot, way more than Australian. We are very frugal compared to Americans.
Yeah.
From a cultural perspective, like over there, it's just like everything's on sale. You can buy anything and everything, and it's the paradise of shopping.
Correct.
So if people don't have that money to buy, well, then the shopkeepers and businesses will suffer. You can get a recession. So there could have been unintended consequences for that. We don't know, so the jury's out there. But there are some risks here that economists are pointing out. But I want to bring that to the Bible here, because there are actually some Bible passages that do talk about charging interest on people.
Okay.
For example, Exodus chapter 22, verse 25. It says, if you lend money to my people, the poor among you, you are not to act as a creditor to him. You shall not charge him interest. So when God was setting up Israel as a nation, God says, hey, by the way, if a poor person asks you for money, yes, go lend them the money, but don't charge them any interest. Don't profit from that. Another passage in the Old Testament, still in Deuteronomy, would even go even further to say, hey, by the way, if any countryman of yours asks for money, don't lend them with interest. If a foreigner is asking for money and you lend to the foreigner, that's fine. You can charge them interest. But among you, I actually want you guys to help one another instead of, stepping on each other's throats, financially speaking.
Yeah.
Jesus would even go even further than that, as his custom was. And he would say this. I'm getting this from Luke chapter 6, verse 34 to 35. He says, if you lend to those from whom you expect to receive, what credit is that to you? Even sinners lend to sinners in order to receive back the same amount. But love your enemies and do good and lend expecting nothing in return. And your reward will be great, and you will be sons of the Most High. For he himself is kind to ungrateful and evil men.
Wow. Love it.
So Jesus goes even beyond and says, hey, when you're lending money to people, lend without expecting it to return.
Yep.
Now, a lot of people took issue with that teaching, and I think that they still do today. But I think I learned how to apply it in a very sustainable way in your life. Because when you're lending to someone without expecting to receive, what is it that you're doing? You're actually being generous. You're giving, but you're giving with dignity. Because when someone comes to you asking for money because they need, and you're lending them an amount, and say, hey, I'm lending this money. I'm expecting for you to pay back. What if that person cannot pay back for some reason? Jesus says, hey, don't expect to return. That's okay. Forgive them. Forgive their debts. Just like God has forgiven your debts, which were way greater than that debt of your neighbor for you. So how do you do this? Well, what I learned to do this is I have set up, between my wife and I, we set up an amount where we have a little account where we call the generosity account. In that generosity account, we put a little bit of money every paycheck, like a small little percentage. You can choose whatever, it fluctuated over time. Sometimes it's more, sometimes it's less, depending on our situation, but there's always there. So that if someone comes and asks us for money, says, hey, here you go. I have are you needing some money? Sometimes people say, yeah, I need $500. I say, look, I can help with $250 if that helps. Oh, yeah, that helps. And when that money is being paid back, because people like to pay back, it's a matter of dignity. Guess where that money goes to?
Straight back in the box.
To that same account to keep helping someone else that is in need. So I think that one of the things that I learned is, yes, lend without expecting anything in return, but talk to God first and set aside how much can I actually lend that this is not going to fail my family. Because there's also no wisdom in you lending all the money that you have and then the person squanders it and now you don't have to provide food for your own family. This is not what Jesus is saying here.
Yeah.
You're not supposed to burn your body just to keep someone warm. It's about being generous. It's about being it's about being smart, and it's about giving people dignity as well.
You're listening to the Breakfast Show podcast on Faith FM. Positively different.
That's right. And have been talking about credit cards and debts. And you know what, Shell? 16% of Australians said that they have never really learned how to properly manage their money. And they are, as a result of that, in financial stress. So my friend Sam and I, Sam, who is a professional financial
and we get
counselor,
him here on the breakfast show at times.
We have him in the breakfast show at times. He and I started a podcast called The 2 Cents. So it's financial advice, and not financial advice, but it's financial education that you should have gotten from your parents, but sometimes for some reason, maybe your parents themselves didn't really know. So if you are going through financial hardship, if you'd like to get some education, some tips on how to structure your budgets and how to get out of debts, we have the right podcast for you. Just text me here to 0491 064 669 with the code word #2cents, and we are going to send the link of this podcast series to you. This podcast series has already gotten a lot of fans. A lot of people write to us, hey, thank you so much for it. And I believe that if you're struggling financially, if you don't really know how to organize yourself financially, if this is all Greek to you, well, 2 Cents podcast is designed specifically for someone like you. So 2 Cents to 0491 064 669. I am now honored to call in our good friend, Dr. John Ashton, who's going to take us on a, how can I say, in a tour to Sandfly in Tasmania, because there's something really interesting that exists there. But first and foremost, Happy New Year to you, Dr. John. It's great to have you on board with us again this year.
Yes, Happy New Year. Yes, hope it's a great year for us all.
Thank you very much.
For sure.
So, Dr. John, where is Sandfly in Tasmania, and why is it special?
Well, it's interesting. Until you contacted me about the large fossil deposits there, I wasn't aware that it was special, because I actually lived at Sandfly for about 7 years myself. So it's a small little rural area about 25 kilometres south of Hobart. Just 5 or 6 kilometres inland from Margate on the D'Entrecasteaux Channel there. So, yes, just south of Hobart.
Yeah, because when people talk about Sandfly, if you look on the internet for Sandfly, Tasmania, they'll say, hey, it's a picturesque, semi-rural town. There's some mining history there, but nobody talks about fossils. So what kind of fossils do we find there, and why are they, interesting?
Yes, well, I think they're mainly just interesting to geologists, but the property, we had a 70-acre property there, and we had a dolerite quarry as part of the quarry. So Sandfly is an area where there's a mixture of sedimentary rocks, but quite a lot of volcanic activity in the past, where you had particularly doleritic sills there, horizontal flows of lava, and dikes, vertical flow. So there's quite a lot of that material, and there was certainly a large outcrop of that on a ridge on one of our properties.
Just a curiosity, Dr. John, how do you identify these lava material? Is it black? Is it white? Can a unlearned person or a lay person just look at that and say, hey, this has been lava in the past? How do you identify that?
Well, look, no, in a couple of minutes on the over the radio, no, it's not an easy task.
Okay. I was just curious about that.
Because and one of the reasons is some Ingis rocks are very hard and some are quite soft. So quite near here where I live is Nora Head with the lighthouse, and if you walk around the rock shelf there, you'll notice that there are these troughs, these areas where there's a section of rock maybe a metre wide that is being eroded away much faster than the surrounding rock, which is sandstone and conglomerate. And that rock that's eroded more faster, again, is an igneous dike, a volcanic intrusion. So it's softer rock. In the case of the dolerite, it's a harder rock. They can be all different colours. Granite, for example, can be white, pink, grey. But also, of course, heat-treated or what we call metamorphosed sedimentary rocks can also look to the inexperienced eye as a volcanic rock in that it can be hard and semi-crystalline and so forth. So it is a tricky thing. I think one of the things to point out, though, that in the area there, I had to actually look up the area and look up the geology of that particular area. And there's a few really good reports online with regard to the geology of the sandfly area there. And there are these deposits of marine organisms. So you've got Panastella, and they're a very common fossil that is found in many places around the world. They tend to be sort of like tiny little lumps spread out like a fan of flowers or an array of, it's hard to describe, sort of like, sort of, they're very tiny little dots. Maybe another way to describe it, a bit like Braille. And what these are tiny organisms, I guess a bit similar to coral in that they're a stationary organism. They grow out, they have a lot of little tentacles that come out, but they're very tiny. And so the fossils are the hard parts of these animals mainly. And so one of the comments was that, why are these huge mounts here? Well, just like you get sort of coral reefs and you have these organisms growing together, they grow in large amounts together. The other shells that are found there are your common bivalve brachiopod type shells, a number of different varieties there. So essentially what it's saying is it's a marine environment. And these marine environments that we find on land are very strong evidence of the global flood. And I think one of the most spectacular aspects of it is that we find these sort of seashell things up on in the Himalayas or the Himalayas, up on Mount Everest, these sort of things. We know, for example, in Peru, up in the mountains in Peru, they've found hundreds of fossils of whales, dolphins, sharks, these sort of things up on the mountain. So what this is telling us is that the surface of the Earth has undergone massive changes in the past. And when we look at the surface of the Earth, we know that the Earth has gone through a massive extinction event caused by water. Now, the conventional geology textbooks say that there's about 4 or 5 global extinction events by water, and they put them tens to hundreds of millions of years apart. But we know from the evidence that it must have been one event at a very short period of time. And the reasons for this is that when we look at the layers that have been laid down, such as in the Grand Canyon and this sort of thing, we've got these massive layers that are, when you look at the Grand Canyon, sort of a mile deep and places and so forth. We've got all these layers that are conformably laid down on top of one another. Now, what that means is there's no sign of erosion in between. There's no signs of bioturbulation in between the layers. And so that is where you have small organisms, worms and this sort of thing make little burrows and this sort of thing. There's no sign of that. There's just these layers are just laid down fresh on top of one another. There's either fossils in there like buried animals or there isn't. And this is a global event. And so what it says is that
may I say one thing, Dr. John? Because when I grew up or when I started to learn more about the evidences for creation, people would often call the Grand Canyon as a majestic evidence of that. But I have found out that I have seen so many patterns just like that outside of the Grand Canyon. Even in the United States, I was there recently. I went to the Red Rock National Park. There's tons of patterns similar to that one in Brazil. I think that all over the globe, we find these sediment on top of sediment, different layers with no pattern, with no evidence of erosion whatsoever in them. It's not just in one place. I think it's worldwide, isn't it?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, no, it's worldwide. And this is powerful evidence that these dates that they put on to separate these layers can't be correct. But the important thing is that we have the evidence, it's very clear, of global extinction events worldwide. Now, the other, and they also must have happened in rapid succession. Other evidence for this is the cases where you see very, very tight folding of the layers, where during this particular time there's been uplifts. The layers have been bent, and they're bent, sometimes on a really sharp angles, like an S, something like that. And again, this could only happen while the sediments are fresh and soft, not once they'd hardened. If that happened, they just crack and break and so forth. So look, there's heaps of evidence that way. They're overwhelming evidence for the global flood as described in the Bible. Now, some people again say, well, hang on, when you look at the geological column, you've got, mainly marine organisms down the bottom, like you don't find rabbits buried down with trilobites, this sort of thing. But we understand, of course, that it talks in Genesis that God made the sea creatures. So there were seas right at the beginning as well. And so essentially the geologic column is a representation of what you would expect if animals were buried. So you'd expect the marine organisms already at the bottom, and the larger and more agile, more sort of versatile animals further up in the column, and that's what we see. But the column is actually a lot more mixed up than we're often led to believe. For example, dinosaurs and mammals coexisted. I saw a spectacular example of this one time when I was staying in Hawaii for a holiday and visited the museum there. And there was an international display there, and they had a fossil of a mammal who had eaten a baby dinosaur. And the remains, the skeleton of the dinosaur was in the stomach. Yeah.
I've never seen it. That's incredible.
Yeah, so I actually saw the fossil. It was on display. There's a write-up about it in Nature, but it's not like there's heaps of examples of that, and heaps of examples of when they look at these fossil beds, you have all these animals mixed up. For example, often sometimes where they find the trees that have been buried, and they find sort of land-dwelling animals that have hidden in the trees mixed up with marine animals that got buried with them and all mixed up in the hollow tree. Wow. So we need to understand this, that the fossil record, while there are these beds at times that have, like in the Morrison Formation that occupies, probably massive area, maybe a third, covers about a third or maybe more of the United States. It's where they find a lot of the dinosaur fossils. So we got this massive area, right, that is full of these buried dinosaurs. Now, sometimes we do find articulated skeletons, that is where they're all joined together. But often the bits of the dinosaur are broken up, right, as well. And these tend to be sorted in, so you have the bigger bones down the bottom and the smaller fragments up higher, just as you'd expect.
Doctor, this is really fascinating, which also reminds me one thing. Remember that you spoke to us a little bit about that excellent documentary, Expelled, No Intelligence Allowed? And it's interesting to see how much prejudice academia has when evaluating the evidence for a global flood in the body of fossils that we have. But I actually have good news here, Dr. John, because I can send a link to our listeners if they are interested to learn more about it, learn more about the origins, and particularly about how academia treats. Why is it so many scholars have so much prejudice when evaluating and analyzing evidence like the ones that you have presented that point towards a global flood, just like the Bible described? If you'd like to get the link to that documentary, if you'd like to learn more about the topic, you can text me here with the hashtag expelled to 0491-064-669, and I'll send the link to you. Dr. John, we have to move on, but I just want to thank you so much for bringing us. It's quite fascinating that such a small, tiny place, Sandfly, can tell us so much about the origins, not only the origins, but the history, the geological history of our planet, and particularly that it is so aligned with what the Bible describes.
Certainly, yes.
Dr. John, thank you very much for your participation. We're looking forward to have you again with us next time. And now we're going to be listening to a song. This is by Discovery Singers with Sing the Mighty Power of God.
You are listening to The Breakfast Show here on Faith FM. And yeah, we have more great content coming up for you in the next hour, so make sure that you stay tuned with us.
Thanks for being a part of the Faith FM family. Join our community on Facebook or get in touch at 1-800-FAITH-FM.